In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to texture our fur planes. Alright, so looking at our project the way it is, we don't have any fur planes that we've imported in with this particular model. And this model was not meant for that. This is to give you the base model, and then the fur planes are going to actually be a separate object altogether. Now, if we want to paint something like that inside of Substance Painter, we would actually have to bring in just a simple plane. You could go ahead and create these textures pretty easily inside of Photoshop or something like that, but I want to show you just a technique of doing it right here inside of Substance Painter. If this is the only texturing software that you have, you'd want to use something like this. So the way I would go about doing this is just by creating a new project. And so I'm going to select a mesh, and I've already exported one out from 3ds Max. But really quickly, let me actually show you how to do that really quick. Let's go ahead and go into 3ds Max, and you'll see that I have a plane here. I've separated it out into 2 segments per, so that way I have 4 quadrants here. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm actually going to take this and export it out. So just go to File and Export selected, and there's texture plane there, just like we normally would. I'm going to hit OK on both of these, and then we'll go back into Substance and set up our project. So go to New Project, Select, and we're going to go to our folder, Project Files, and 3ds Max Export. There's texture plane, and hit Open. We're going to use the DirectX normal map format, and then the document resolution I'm going to leave at, well, actually, let's go ahead and go to 2K. We could always go down if we need to. I don't need to add any maps to this because we're painting just a diffuse map at this point, and we're going to hit OK. Now you'll notice that it brings up our environment, the default panorama. I'm going to go to the one that is being used by the dog right now, and then I'm actually going to take that environment opacity down. We'll switch this up to high, so that way we can see the high quality of this just like we would with our texture on the base dog. And now what we want to do is we want to start painting out some similar patterns that we would see in the dog. And so you can paint these all over the texture. It doesn't matter you know, if it's in one quadrant or whatever. As long as it fits on there, it's totally fine. And so you paint as many patterns that you need for the hair. Now the hair that we're looking at on an animal is that hair that breaks the silhouette. So if you look around, like at the bottom of the dog, you know, if you look at an actual reference image, look around at the bottom and you'll see a lot of hair just at the brisket of the dog. And so you'll see that it goes in a couple of different directions, but the hair is very similar in color and in structure. And so you could actually create a single texture for that entire bottom part of the dog. You'll also see something a little bit similar around the cheeks or the jowls of the dog, you know, in that mask that we had before. You can create a texture that is very similar to that. So let's go ahead and get into how to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and I'm going to look for my spray brush. And let's go ahead and find that. There's spot spray right here. And I'm just going to modify this brush. I'm going to modify this in such a way that it gives me strands instead of this splatter. So if we take our size jitter down, flow jitter down, angle, and position jitter, we get something that looks like this. So it actually looks like strands. The really cool thing about this is we can begin to modify other options as well, like how many spots there are in this. We can take that down to about 5. We can adjust the size of those. So we can go to about 0.1, 0.15 or so on both the X and the Y. So you get a little bit larger strand. And we could come up to the top. We could take our spacing down to 1, which is the minimum. And then you can adjust the size, but that's not going to give you the size of each strand. That's only going to give you the size of the overall brush as a whole. And then we'll adjust our flow, okay, using pin pressure. And so if I come in, I can actually start to paint on this. And I'm actually going to add a fill layer to this at the very bottom underneath. And I'm going to make this black. Okay. Also, whenever you are painting something like this, go ahead and set up your document to where metallic is gone and height is gone. And then add a new channel and add an opacity channel. And so here you can actually capture your opacity while you're painting along. So with this, let's make sure that opacity is active. Let's make sure that the color that is being painted is white. And so as we paint on our paint layer, we can come in and we can start to paint in something that looks like hair. So I'm going to grab my base color just for right now. I'm going to go ahead and pick this color. And I'm going to pick kind of like that red that we had in our fur from before. Take a look at the RGB values here if you need to get those again, and hit OK. So there we have that. It's everything that we need. Our roughness is all the way up, so we don't want that to be there. So we'll take this up to 1. You might add a little bit of shininess to that, but not much. Okay. And then we'll come in and we'll start painting. You could turn on your lazy mouse function here, and you could come in, let's go to something like 10, and you could start to just paint on this, and you can start to paint strands of fur. And what you'll want to do is you'll want to paint out just one of those sections that you can see, and you'll paint it out kind of large. Okay, and I'll just come in and I'll start to paint these strands. If the lazy mouse is becoming a little bit too much for you, draw it down a little bit, and then you can get a little bit more control. I like to have that nice and smooth. Now at this point, I'm not really worried about how this looks at this point. I'm just trying to get the overall shape of that, just using this base color. I'm not worried about the tips of the shapes or anything like that. I'm just trying to think of what I see on this. So what I'm working on right now is strands of fur that you might see just kind of sticking off of the body somewhere. So this will be kind of a generically used one, and we'll go ahead and we'll paint this out. Okay, and I'm just trying to get that shape. And then as we draw this up, we start to get all of these strands out. The really cool thing about this is we're painting our opacity at the exact same time. And so if you want to see that, you can actually hit C, and you can go through the different channels that you have available, and we come up on our base color and our opacity. There's a problem with our opacity, however. So the issue is with the fill layer. You can see that opacity is here, but the opacity is set to white. So let's set that to black. Go back to our layer 1, and opacity for some reason has been turned off on layer 1. Let's make sure that's turned on. So it's not a big issue. I just didn't realize that we had turned that, or that had been turned off whenever we started painting. So we have everything back here. We just have to go ahead and repaint that section there. So here you can see the opacity, and we have that flow, and so you can start to get a little bit of a fade there. Let's go ahead and hit M to go back to our material, and let's paint out that shape again. And again, I just want the base of this. So I'm creating just a generic shape of fur that we see. And we'll kind of flare that out again. And then we'll continue to add color to it until we get the final look that we want. You might want to look at this as a whole just to make sure that you have enough room and enough real estate for this texture. This is only a 1024 by 1024 texture, and so just be aware of that. Okay, and so I'm just continuing to paint these out. All right, good. Okay. Let's go ahead and back up here. Wait for that to undo there. And then let's add a new layer on top of this, and we're going to choose a different color Let's try something a little bit lighter. And then I'm going to come in and maybe make my brush size just a little bit smaller. And take that lazy mouse up a little bit. And I'll just kind of start to stroke over the top of that. And just really trying to separate out some colors here. And some strands and clumps is what I'm really looking for here. So we have clumps of fur, and we want to kind of start to separate those out. Again, always following along with the direction of your fur. And so now you can start to see some clumps starting to come out there. All right, and so once you have that variation there, you can start to come in with something a little bit darker. So at this point, I'm just going to come in and select just kind of a dark brown, quite a bit darker than what we had before. And on this one, I'm going to go ahead and make this much smaller. And I'm just going to come in and kind of start to create a little bit of depth in all of this. And I'm really just putting a lot of this in between the clumps. So you can see that separating out there. And it just basically gives volume to this fur. And now once I have this clumped out, I need to bring those highlights back. And so then I come in with a color that is quite a bit lighter than everything else. And I forgot to add a layer to that last one, but that's okay. And I'll come in and I'll just start adding some highlights back into this. Okay. So we'll just add that back in. And we really want these lighter colors to be out on the outside edge. Okay. And then, if you want, you could also go ahead and just grab another brush altogether. So maybe your default brush. And you could start to add in some just random strands that you might see. So I'll use Thorn. Flow, add the pressure to that. And I'm going to add a little bit of hardness to this. And then I'm going to take the size down of that. And then you can kind of come in and add a few strands here and there. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and add the size pressure to that as well. So we'll kind of get some random strands of fur kind of hanging out across this, and that just kind of breaks up the overall pattern that you see on that. So just kind of be careful as you're doing that as well. I made a couple of strands that didn't look quite as natural as I would like them to. And all the while you're painting this, and the opacity is being painted on that as well. Okay. So we've got a tuft of fur here that we could use for our animal. And there's going to be some transparency in between all of that. So we'll be layering this on top of other pieces and things like that. And so, we could go through this process and we can create all of the different tufts of fur. I just kind of want to show you what this is going to look like on just this one, and then you could finish out the others based on your own needs. And so I just created a generic one, giving you the basic pipeline for that. So really quickly, let's go ahead and take a look at our opacity channel. And you can see that most of the strands are there, and it looks pretty good. We have a few strands that are a little bit lighter, okay, but that's okay. That's gonna do pretty good for us, I think. Let's go ahead and hit C again. This is our roughness, and then our base color, and then overall material. So how do we get this back, and how do we use this on a model? How do we use this on a fur plane for the game resolution mesh? And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to export out the textures next, including this one, and then after we have all of those exported, we'll bring those back into 3ds Max, and we'll start creating a couple of those fur planes and showing you how to build that, UV it properly, and then how to set that onto the game resolution mesh.